Yeah, Dune Part 2, y'all. A romantic comedy. All right, so how many of you, by a round of applause, have seen Dune Part 2? All right, that doubles what we've had so far. I think there's been 4 throughout the previous morning. So this is the hip crew in here. So it delivers. This is an epic blockbuster, no doubt. If you go to IMDb, you'll see that people who have seen it and rated it, it is rated an 8.5, which I cannot explain to you, if you don't use IMDb, how high that is for a movie. So one movie that was absolutely beloved in the last few years that pretty much everyone agreed that is a good movie was Top Gun Maverick. 8.2 was Top Gun Maverick. So this is 8.5. Okay, so I probably will never preach again on a movie that's rated 8.5 on IMDb because that's how hard that is for that to happen because we're critical Americans. 2.1, it sucked. The popcorn was stale. Well, that's not the movie, though. So this is the most difficult movie in 20 years of doing this that I've ever had to summarize a plot for. So since most of you haven't seen it, we're going to break, come back in 3 hours after the Browns game. You can watch that in the Browns, multi-view. All right, so if you've seen the movie, you're like, good luck with this one, preacher. This is not easy. So set in the distant future, there's this harsh, inhospitable desert planet called Arrakis. Its ancient name is Dune. And so the story follows Paul Atreides, who's the main character, as his family, the noble house of Atreides, is going to war over something on Arrakis that's only found on Arrakis called spice. And spice is not only a mood-altering drug, it can help you travel, like interstellar traveling. So it's a drug, but it also helps you with interstellar travel. At the time in Arrakis, there was a popular song that came out called Spice, Spice Baby. It was all the kids were about it. So Paul's father, spoiler alert, dies in the first film, Dune Part 1. Paul's mother, who is highly featured in this film, is Lady Jessica. Lady Jessica was Paul's father's concubine, so this is his mother. Lady Jessica is an acolyte of the Bene Gesserit sisterhood, we'll call it. It's basically a exclusive sisterhood of women who have these abilities, okay? They're very powerful, they're very political, and so basically they're witches, okay? That's the best way to put it. They're very dark side of religion, hissy, secretive, that kind of thing. They're witches, okay? They wear black shawls everywhere they go, real sexy. And so they're very, very, have I mentioned they're political? So Paul was born to one of these witches, this concubine of his father, Jessica. She is from the Bene Gesserit disciplines and teaches Paul some of the Bene Gesserit disciplines, it's a sisterhood. You don't typically teach boys this stuff. So also at some point when Paul is exposed to the spice that is on the planet, he starts having these intense premonitions. He starts seeing troubling visions of the future. So there's a lot of supernatural stuff in this sci-fi film. So the planet Arrakis, there's also on this planet, there are the natives, which are like desert-type people that are called the Fremen. And that's a very important part of this movie, part 2. And they live in caves. Near the end of the first film, Paul and his mother, Lady Jessica, they encounter some natives, some Fremen, deep in the desert, out where people don't even believe humans can survive. It's so intense, the desert is out there. And they follow these Fremen to their tribe, their home, and they plan to live with them. So that's basically setting up the second film. We haven't even gotten to the second film yet, okay? So late in the second film, it is, that's what's happening. They're headed toward the Fremen home. So now, for that particular tribe, now Dune Part 2. So when Paul enters the Fremen community with his mother Jessica, deep in the desert, there's a great debate about who Paul is. Some believe that Paul's a spy, and they want to kill Paul and his mother, okay? He's a spy. He's an outsider. What's he doing here? The people are divided. But some people believe that Paul is Lisan al-Gaib, and that basically means Messiah. So like Paul, he's a big deal. He's a spy. No, he's Messiah. And so there's a guy who is a chieftain a leader of this tribe, this Fremen tribe, and his name is Stilgar, and he's played by Javier Bardem. And he's incredible. He's incredible pretty much every role he ever plays. He represents the devoted believers, all right? He sees signs that Paul is Messiah, okay? He sees signs. So he's a man of prayer, and he believes in Paul and sees many signs that Paul's the Messiah. He's constantly pointing out old prophecies that he sees Paul fulfilling before his very eyes. So Stilgar quotes old prophecies all the time. Prophecies like the prophet shall know the ways of the desert. Another one is the Messiah will bring back the trees. He will bring back a green paradise in the midst of this harsh desert. And every time Paul quotes a prophecy, every time Paul does something interesting, Stilgar sees it, quotes a prophecy, and whenever he quotes a prophecy, at the end of it, he says, as written. Like when he sees Paul fulfilling something, he says, as written. And all the other believers in their original language say, as written. And so they believe Paul is fulfilling these prophecies, and they echo, as written. On the other side of that, there's Chani. Chani's played by Zendaya, and her name is spelled C-H-A-N-I. It sounds like, every time Paul says it, Johnny, but it's C-H, Chani. And so, for me, a grown dude, honestly, the only thing I know Zendaya from is she's Spider-Man's girlfriend, okay? I know everybody else like, oh, no, you're kidding, the fashion and the Disney, and I'm a grown man, okay? So she's Spider-Man's girlfriend. So this is a much better range acting for her for what I've seen her in now. Dude, she's awesome. She has some faces in this film. She throws some darts. She has some expressions. I'm like, dang, there we go. Okay, girl can act, all right? So Chani represents the non-believers and the doubters in this Fremen community. She is a courageous warrior. She's a battle-hardened fighter. And Chani has doubts in believing that anyone can be Messiah, okay? Like whatever. And if there is a Messiah, it's certainly not Paul, this guy right in front of her eyes who she starts getting a little bit of goo-goo eyes for. And so that's her position. Here's the thing about Dune Part 2, for instance, or Dune in general. You can't do a one-to-one comparison of Dune to the gospel of Jesus. That said, religion is featured very prominently throughout this whole story. But faith is often portrayed in a negative light. And so for instance, there's a scene that kind of juxtaposes these two views of Paul. There's a scene pretty early in the film where there's a religious ceremony going on. Jessica, Paul's mom, goes into a cave, and Stilgar, the religious dude, he tells her basically, if you go do this thing, which was drinking something called the water of life, you can become the Reverend Mother, kind of the next leader of this religious group among the Fremen. And so Jessica goes in to drink in a cave the water of life. It's poison. And the only one that can survive it is a trained woman. It'll kill males and it'll kill untrained women. I'll let you watch the movie to understand what that means by the trained and untrained. But while that's going on in a cave, Paul is outside. And he sees Chani and some of her warrior friends under a tent. And they're laughing, presumably about what's going on in the cave. And they're laughing, and they're calling the water of life. They're making fun of the water of life concept. It's a religious thing they don't believe in. They're calling it worm piss. And he sees them laughing, and he comes over. Yeah, you're allowed to say piss in church because I said it. And so Paul's like totally curious, like, you don't believe in all this, And Chani says definitively, no, we don't. And another female warrior, Fremen, says, these are old Southern beliefs. Southern tribes believe a Messiah will come to deliver us from evil. Now, I love the little nuance here of who are the really fanatical believers. They call them the fundamentalists, people down south, which is, okay? That's. I don't think that's accidental. It's like, oh yeah, the fundamentalists down south. It comes up all the time in this story. So Paul asks, so you guys don't believe in the Lisan al-Gaib, which is Messiah. And Chani says, we believe in Fremen. Otherwise, we believe in ourselves. We don't need some, Messiah. And she says, if you want to control people, you tell them a Messiah will come, and they'll wait for centuries. And so this is a huge theme in Dune Part 2, is a word, if you put a word counter, and you had a piece of paper or just a counter, like you'd count attendance, and you waited to hear the word power or control come up, in the trailer alone, you'll be clicking that thing away. If you watch the whole movie, power, control, it is a theme. And so a huge theme is really religion and control also in Dune. And the whole film just centers around also the other key word, which is Messiah. I have never heard a film use the word Messiah, a Jesus film, use the word Messiah as much as Dune 2 does. It is constantly coming up, Messiah, 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 or their names that they have for Messiah also. And so it's all about Messiah. The word Messiah is featured far more than any gospel film I've seen. And so Paul, ultimately, this is what it comes down to, enters the Fremen world as kind of like from the outside, and he incarnates. He attempts to become one of, and he enters into their world. And during that time, there's a Fremen songwriter named Joan Osborne who writes a song, "What if Paul was one of us?" It's an old person joke, okay? Like the whole front row is like, I don't even know, are you making a joke? Is that in the film? So Paul seems to be fulfilling prophecies left and right, and that's what this is all about. Is he Messiah, or is he not Messiah? Is there even a Messiah? So I'm going to name the story. I want you to throw out the Messiah, the chosen one, or the hero, the epic hero from that story, okay? Matrix. Neo. Okay, here we go. J.K. Rowling's magical world. Yeah, I can't say Harry Potter because that's the hero, right? Oh, Harry Potter world. Harry Potter. Okay. So what about Hunger Games trilogy? Katniss Everdeen. What about the original Star Wars trilogy? Luke. What about my nerds, my readers? I guess Amazon Prime now. Wheel of Time. Rand Althor. Thank you. Thank you for being in every service, Jason Liu, to save me on that one. And Kung Fu Panda. Poe, thank you very much. I mean, we're getting to the serious stuff now. All right, so turn to Matthew chapter 11. You can grab a free paperback Bible from under the seat in front of you or download the Bible app for free. So the words Christ and Messiah are the same word, two different languages. The Greek word is Christ, Jesus the Christ. It's a title. It's not his last name like Smith. Jesus the Christ. And Messiah is the Hebrew word for that, same word. Both words mean anointed or the anointed one. And it comes from this old Israelite practice of anointing a person with oil so that they could be installed into a special office or a special task, like priest or like king. Oil poured on them. They were anointed for that office or for that task. Well, it came throughout ancient Israel history after they were captive in Babylon for a while, and then especially when you get to the Hellenistic period of history, more and more the Messiah pointed to someone future. People talked about a future agent that God would send into the world, a military or political hero, they assumed, that would come into the world and would deliver Israel, would set them free. And so they pictured it being a person sent by God who would lead the Jews in a rebellion, keyword, against an evil empire, which was the Roman Empire. Okay? I don't know if that rings any bells with storytelling. Does it? A rebellion against an evil empire. Star Wars, and also Dune. 100%. This is about people are trying to get spice and control spice on a planet. It's very valuable. And there is literally an empire with an emperor who is in control of that. And that's part of who Paul and his Fremen friends are battling against, as this emperor and the empire. So, go to Matthew 11. We're going to look at this first part of this line. Not even going to complete the first line. That's how long this is going to take. I'm just going to go phrase by phrase. It says in verse 2, when John, who was in prison, ... Okay, so first off, this is talking about John the Baptist. Some people think he was a Methodist. Some people think he was a Presbyterian. No, he was a Baptist. It says it in Scripture. Okay, I'm just kidding. So basically, it just means he's a baptizer. He baptized people in water. And so he was a baptizer. He was a prophet. He was a relative of Jesus himself. And he had the privilege of introducing Jesus to the public and also baptizing Jesus himself. That's pretty cool. He believed Jesus was Messiah, anointed one sent by God. He supported Jesus' ministry. In fact, he even told some of his own personal disciples, go follow Jesus. He's the one that I'm setting up. I'm the harbinger, the forerunner for. Dude, I'm just the opening band. He's the main act. So some of his disciples went and followed Jesus, but he still had some disciples. And so, but now John is imprisoned in a dungeon, in a fortress called Machaerus, and basically he's imprisoned because he boldly denounced something adulterous that was going on. Herod Antipas, who was a Roman ruler, Herod Antipas stole his brother's wife. He seduced her, stole her, and she came to him, and they got married, and John the Baptist went public and was like, dude, that's gross, you know? And he told people publicly, dude, what Herod Antipas did, gross. And then he got thrown in prison by Herod Antipas. So he's in prison now. And scholar William Barclay puts it great when he says, I'll paraphrase, he's like, man, this would be terrible for anybody to be in prison, right? But even worse for someone like John the Baptist. Imagine, John is this outdoorsy man of the desert. He's like a Fremen. He's like my friend Jeremy Speth. He's an outdoorsy dude. And he lived in wide open spaces. The sky is his roof, the breeze in his face. He sleeps under the stars. Now he's confined, 4 walls in this stale, cramped underground dungeon. Paul is probably miserable. And so, it says this, verse 2, when John, who was in prison, heard about the deeds of the Messiah, he sent his disciples, those that were left, to ask Jesus, are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else? This is powerful. I love this story. This is really powerful. All the while, John is struggling in prison. His disciples apparently can visit him, and they're coming with these partial reports of what Jesus is saying and he's doing. And it says they tell him about the deeds of the Messiah. So the author Matthew, who was one of Jesus' 12 disciples, he believes wholeheartedly. He's like, I know who Jesus was. He was the Messiah. This is all after the fact. He's the Messiah. But John the Baptist, he's not so sure anymore while he's in prison. And he has been sure up to this point, but now he's suffering. Now he's in pain. He's in trouble. Everything's going wrong for him, and he knows he's facing execution by Herod Antipas. So he's generally perplexed by the reports that are circulating about Jesus. This is my theory. John the Baptist was kind of a little bit of a hellfire and brimstone preacher. Like, he talked about judgment, and we talked about the guy coming after him. There was fire included. Like, I think he's expecting, has a little bit of a picture of, like, this is what I think the Messiah is going to do. And I know Jesus is the Messiah. This is what I think it's going to look like. And then he gets the reports back about Jesus and who he's hanging out with, and that he speaks truth, but he's also very gentle and very compassionate at the same time. He's like, man, and now I'm in prison, I'm suffering. I just want to make sure my life hasn't been for nothing. And he's confused by the reports, so questions form in his mind, and he starts to doubt. What do we learn from this? There's 2 things we learn from John's questions, 2 things we learn from Jesus' responses. First thing is this: if John the Baptist can have doubts, anyone can have doubts. Anyone. I mean, man, this is a relative of, he baptized Jesus. He was like, I'm not worthy to carry this guy's sandals. I mean, this is legit. Anyone. The most faithful heart can doubt, question, search, especially in a time of crisis, fear, pain, difficulty. Lesson number 1 is doubters are welcome here, man. If the Spirit of Jesus is in Jesus' church, doubters are welcome. We put out the welcome mat for people with sincere spiritual questions. At Momentum, dare I say, I mean, I kind of speak for everybody in a vision casting culture way. We understand how hard it is to believe in this day and age. It's difficult to have faith. Your faith will almost always be attacked in society. And I know how it is in some churches. I know a lot of pastors. I know a lot of churches. And in some churches, not all, it's not like Momentum's the only one or anything like that. But if you have an honest question, there are some churches where the culture is, you have a question that's sincere about something that everybody assumes or knows, and you have a question about it, you get that look like you just made an off-color, inappropriate joke in front of your wife in public, and she gives you the... You ask a question sometimes in a Bible study or a Mo group, you're like, but I don't understand why you think this is true or this is accurate. Doesn't that contradict? You get that from other church people. No. You know, like, oh, you get the nudge under the table, the kick, like, ow, what was that for? I just asked a question. That's kind of the feel that you get. And so I think the vision for a church, which is the Spirit of Jesus, is to be patient, to be gentle, to be empathetic, to honest doubting. Yeah, if somebody's just trying to start arguments or whatever, sure, that's annoying. But if it's someone who's honestly asking questions, doubting, man, it should be welcome. Chani, in the movie, she doesn't believe Paul's the one. She doesn't believe he's Messiah. She doubts that anybody could be the Messiah. That's how it comes across. But she has good reason to doubt. So this is kind of a reveal in Dune Part 1, is that we find out that all the prophecies that the Fremen people have about Messiah, they were all fabricated by the Bene Gesserit sisterhood. They're fabricated. And so you're like, whoa, that raises a lot of questions in Dune 2 about like, okay, so is Paul a superhuman Messiah type? So she has good reason to doubt whether Paul really is some superhuman Messiah. And I think it's really cool in this story. Notice Jesus doesn't reprimand John the Baptist. He doesn't say, okay, disciples, I want you to go back to John, and I want you to tell him, how dare you? I will give you the back of my hand, John. Like, I will travel all the way to that dungeon and slap you silly. No, God is actually pretty darn understanding about doubts. Through the book of Psalms, which God's like, I include these doubts in my inspired scripture in the book of Psalms. In this situation, John gets a straight answer from Jesus. And in fact, after he expresses doubt through his disciples, if you read on, the very next passage is Jesus talking about how John is the greatest man that's ever been born to a woman, and up to this point in history. Like, on the heels of him expressing doubt, man, that dude, you guys, John, you know him? Man, greatest dude's ever been born to a woman. Wow. That's pretty darn gentle and pretty darn gracious towards someone who has honest doubts, especially when they're going through pain. So here's the big deal. One scholar said this. I think this is so true. A dying man, though, cannot afford to have doubts. And that's huge. John is in prison. He knows he's about to die. And he's like, has my life been for nothing? I just need to know, are you the one? And I'll be honest, every one of us is a dying man or woman. And so the important thing is not to just sit in your doubts or your questions, but to actively ask questions, to search for answers, to do your research, to engage Jesus with your doubts. You don't get points for being spiritual by just having doubts. You get points for saying, let me search, let me dig, let me ask tough questions that people are willing to talk about. So in Dune, the coming Messiah has some prophetic titles, some nicknames, and some of them are things like the one who points the way. Another one is the voice from the outer world. So somehow the Messiah is supposed to be from within the Fremen, but also seems contradictory from the outer world. How would that happen? And so in Dune Part 2, the predominant question is constantly, is Paul the one? And you're trying to figure out through the film, is there really a supernatural, is Paul a supernatural Messiah? You know, is he the one who points the way? Is he the voice from the outer world? Are there signs that are going to convince us of that by the end of the film? And I love this. Notice that John the Baptist's response, his question to Jesus, what he asks is this. I've been kicking this around for like 2 years now, I think, in my head. John the Baptist asks, are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else? That's fascinating. So notice John the Baptist doesn't say, are you the one, or should we stop looking? So this is what I mean by that. The implication here, I think, is that if Jesus is not the one, if I reject him as Messiah, we won't be able to stop looking. Like, are you the one, or should we expect someone else? That means the search then continues. Think about, for example, spiritual, like actual religious Jews today. If they're not a Messianic Jew, meaning they believe Jesus is the Messiah, if they're a Hasidic Jew, they're a practicing Jew in some way, what are they still looking for and waiting for? A Messiah. They don't believe Jesus is him. So who does Isaiah prophesy about, the person that we call the servant? Who's Genesis chapter 3 about, who will crush the head of the serpent? Like, who is? He's someone to come. They're still looking. And so, do you think it's any different for us? Like, if you think about it for you, if you reject Jesus as Messiah, then the search goes on. The search really goes on. Recently, I heard about a guy who counsels college students, and he was saying that he thinks about 80% of the college students that he counsels are all torn up over whether they will ever find the one. Okay? And what he means, he's like, they don't say it out loud. He goes, it's in their heads, though. They're constantly thinking as they meet someone that's like interesting or attractive to them, are you the one? And what does the one mean? Well, the one who will make everything okay. The one who will help the fact that I don't think so highly of myself. I have a poor self-esteem. So the one that will help with that and show that I have value. The one that will be my love partner, my romantic partner. The one who will put everything right is how our minds frame that. It's like, who will be the one? And so, when you think about it, I'm not making fun of today's music because this is every decade. When I was a kid, same thing. You look at every decade, the pop songs that are made, and basically what's being said is the same thing in a different way in many of those pop songs, and that is this: without you, I don't have any meaning. Right? Without you, I just don't have any meaning. I can't live without you. What good am I without you? Or from the other perspective, I can save you. Like the guy that you have right now, he's not good enough. He doesn't treat you the way. I can save you and give your life meaning. You can think of all kinds. You just listen for the pop songs. I could be your hero, baby. I mean, there's some way I'm going to save you or you're going to save me. Got no meaning in my life and you don't either. Hey, let's team up and give our lives meaning. This is what our hearts do. This is what our hearts are actually made for in a sense. And this is what we do. We messiahify things like romantic love. We messiahify them. I like that sci-fi is kind of in there hidden. Okay. But we messiahify things. And, it's like, here's the deal. If you reject Jesus, you won't be able to stop looking for someone else or something else to messiahify and be your Jesus. This is the way humans are designed, with a God-shaped hole in our heart. Maybe you're cynical about love. You're like, I don't think another guy is going to, some girl's not going to rescue me. So maybe you're cynical about romantic love, or you have romantic love. Then you might messiahify career. You might messiahify nutrition and fitness and health. You might messiahify a goal or a dream. You might messiahify family. You might messiahify a band. You might messiahify a brand. Something is going to be your Messiah. And this isn't just like, I know people like that. It's you and me. It is the fallen human condition. It's not a few people. You can't escape this. No one can escape the search for a Messiah. Are you the one, or should we look for someone else? Because you've got to live for something. There has to be something in your life to infuse yourself with meaning and safety and significance. Something to let you know that your time is worth it here on earth. And that's the thing you get up for in the morning. And so whatever it is, you messiahify it, and it drives you. And so everyone in this room is either looking at someone or something and saying, without this, what good am I? Without this, what good am I? And so the question is it Jesus? Or is it someone or something else? It's not a question of, are you the one, or should we stop looking? You won't be able to stop looking for something to messiahify and make it your meaning that infuses you with purpose. And here's the thing, if you turn something else into Jesus, will it be as wonderful as Jesus? Will it be as forgiving as Jesus? Will your career forgive you if you fail? Will that person never break up with you, never leave you, never cheat? Will it be as faithful as Jesus? Will it be as compassionate? Will it be as adventurous as Jesus? So then there's Jesus' response. There's two lessons we can learn from that. Matthew 11, starting with verse 4. Jesus sends word back to John through his disciples. He says this. Jesus replied, "Go back and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight. The lame walk. Those who have leprosy are cleansed. The deaf hear. The dead are raised. And the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me." So in the movie, the constant question, is Paul the Messiah? Is he the one that we should trust to lead us and be kind of a leader, a hero? And we're leading up to a big final battle. We have to have that in an epic film. The big end of a part 2 is approaching, and the main character, Paul, is reunited with a guy from Dune Part 1, played by Josh Brolin. His name's Gurney in the film. First off, I just want to say I geeked out at this moment during the film, because when these two characters came together right here, I was like, No Country for Old Men. If anyone likes old films, like, oh, that's one of the greatest, so good. And there was like Anton Chigurh, that was the character played by a guy on the right, one of the best bad guys of all time. And then Josh Brolin played kind of the protagonist in that film. And so I was like, yes, they're back together. But then I went back to watching Dune and eating my popcorn. And so Gurney he is a friend of House Atreides, Paul's family, and he's been gone, but now he's back, and he tells Paul where to find Paul's late father's hidden family stockpile of atomic warheads. I didn't see that coming. It's like, whoa, a sci-fi film, and we're going to find atomic warheads. So this is what Paul later tells Chani, Zendaya. Every house possesses an atomic arsenal. I thought ours had been lost. Huge, Chani. It could change everything. I could aim the bombs at the main spice fields. He who can destroy a thing has real control over it. So what he's basically saying is if I aim the atomics at these spice fields, which are so valuable, I'll have leverage with the emperor and the empire when this final battle is about to go down. And so Chani responds, you promised that you didn't want power. And he says back to her, no matter what I do, you still won't trust me. He's trying to convince her, I'm not doing this for me to gain power. I'm trying to gain control, power of the spice fields for the Fremen's sake, for us, because now he's one of the Fremen. And so Paul now, it's interesting, getting to the end of the film, he has now firepower. He has all this atomic firepower, and he also can raise up an army of believers, the fundamentalists from down south, and there's tons of them. They fanatically believe about Paul. And so he can raise both of those up. And it's funny because that's exactly what the Jews were hoping would come with a Messiah. When you come, bring firepower, bring some supernatural firepower, and raise up an army to throw the yoke of the Romans off of us. Like be a military leader, maybe a king, because you're going to be from the line of David, our favorite king. And so that's what the Jews were really kind of expecting the picture of a Messiah to look like. And this is what Paul is starting to bring at the end of this film. Just to give you a little more glimpse into the background of Dune, the author, Frank Herbert, gives this warning, and he says the whole trilogy is about this warning. In 1979, Frank Herbert said, the bottom line of the Dune trilogy is, beware of heroes. Okay, so this isn't like the typical tropes of like a storyteller like George Lucas borrowing from old tropes. He's trying to give a different message in a different way, and it's beware of heroes. He says, much better to rely on your own judgment and your own mistakes. So that comes through the mouth of Chani earlier in the film when she says, we believe in Fremen. We don't believe in any Messiah. We believe in Fremen. We believe in us. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. You don't need some hero, some deliverance, some rescue from the outside. His message is, Frank Herbert, is trust yourself, not a Messiah. And that plays into the background of watching Dune 2. Like, whoa, can I trust this Paul guy? Or is it really about power and control? So how does Jesus tell us that we can know he is the one? How does he tell John the Baptist? How does he tell us through that? What's the evidence? Basically, Jesus says, I am a Messiah for the humble and the weak. That's his response. Like, go back and tell John, the blind, the lame, the lepers, I am spending time with and have come for the weak. So Jesus, first thing we learn from his response is, Jesus is the kind of Messiah who welcomes the weak. And that should be good news for all of us because all of us are the weak. Things that we don't want to do, we do. Things that we want to do, we just can't seem to do those things. I mean, we're all the weak. We're all the broken. We're all the rebelled against God. And so if you're weak and you know it, this is good news. Jesus came for the weak. He shows he's not the kind of Messiah who came, for the powerful, gathering the powerful around him. Jesus never did that. It's like, that's why people were perplexed. Can this really be the Messiah? He shows us that he's the Messiah by coming in weakness for the weak. He comes humbly. He's born in Bethlehem. He comes a fragile baby, and he hangs out with weak people. He calls fishermen to be his main followers and tax collectors who were hated by the Jews. And so he doesn't spend time with the powerful and gather the powerful. He spends time with the weak, and he gathers the weak, and he serves the weak. He came not to bring judgment, which is what John the Baptist, I think, is expecting. Where's the fire? Where's it at? He didn't come to bring judgment. He came to bear judgment. And he didn't come with a spear in his hand, like, here we go, everybody falling behind me. He came with a spear in his side on the cross. Like, this is a totally different thing than human beings, fallen human beings who want power and control, who want everything to be done with fireworks. He's like, but you misinterpreted the kind of Messiah I am. I am a servant-hearted God. I love the weak. I've come for the weak. And he welcomes the weak. And then the last line, this is the last point about Jesus and his response here. The last line is, man, it's so good. Jesus says, blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me. Now, that's a Greek word. This is originally Greek, and all Greek words have like a range of meaning. It could be translated this, this, or this, and they all are kind of similar type words. The NIV stumble is a good translation, but older translations and some other modern English translations say blessed, for instance, New American Standard, which is a stellar translation. Blessed is any person who does not take offense at me. I wish more modern translations would have kept that word, take offense at me, because it is so relevant right now in our society, not just 2024, but just generally now when we live. The King James, the old said, blessed is he whosoever shall not be offended in me. And so the original Greek word is scandalizo, which we've talked about before at Momentum, actually, but it's where we get our word scandal, scandalized. And so it's the idea of tripping up, messing up, falling into a trap. There was a scandal. Did you hear about the scandal? And so, anyways, basically what Jesus is saying here is the only people who are blessed are the ones who see my offensiveness but aren't offended by me. They don't take the offense. They see that I'm offensive, but they don't take the offense. What Jesus is saying is, I'm an offensive Messiah. Like, he's basically saying, I'm offensive. It's like if you ever say to somebody, hey, no offense, but what you're about to say is offensive. That's what Jesus is doing right here. He's like, I'm offensive, but don't take the offense, okay? I know this is kind of a deep thing here, but it's like, hey, no offense, but you struggle with something called halitosis. It smells like something crawled up in your mouth and died, and when you breathe out, it's like fills the room. Like, whoa, that was offensive. Yeah, I said, like, no offense. You knew I was coming in with it, So Jesus is saying, I'm offensive. And we live in a time where we are offended by most stuff. We're just looking for a reason to have our feelings hurt and to be offended by anything. And so the author of Dune, Frank Herbert, again, something he once said is, mine religion for what is good, be very careful when it becomes fanatical. Okay? So this is a very common American human idea, is like, look at religion and then just kind of go to as a smorgasbord. Here's some stuff that fits well with my taste buds. I'll take this, 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 and this. But I'm going to kind of ignore or read quickly through the stuff that Jesus might say that I find offensive. And so that's a very, if you ask someone on the street, what do you think about Jesus? Who is he? The common response you learn from your parents or your professors is often like, man, I think he was a good moral teacher, one of the best humans to ever walk the earth. That's a totally illogical position if you read the Gospels. Absolutely illogical. It doesn't make any sense. And it comes from smart people usually, and you're like, you haven't studied that. You haven't thought that out. You haven't researched that. Because what Jesus said was, I'm going to come back one day and I'm going to judge the entire world. I'm going to send people to heaven, send people to hell. Like, I'm going to be the one to divide the sheep from the goats. Whoa, Matthew 25. He said, I'm equal to the Father. He said, all sins are against me. I'm the only one that can forgive them. I lived before Abraham. Also, I saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning. You saw Satan fall? Wait, so that means, okay, since Satan tempted the first humans in the Garden of Eden, then you pre-exist the first humans? Yeah, I'm eternal. Okay. Here's another one from that good moral teacher who's just, all warm fuzzy. He said, you must hate your father and mother. Thanks, Jesus. My kids are listening. You must hate your father and mother if you're going to follow me, which basically means I demand a loyalty and a love from you that's so intense that all other loyalties look like hatred in comparison. Like, really? Okay, wow. So it's kind of fanatical. But Frank Herbert says, pick the good out, but avoid the fanatical. Jesus is saying, you can't follow me and not be a fanatic. But my fanaticism is for love, and it is for truth, and it is for grace. But truth's in there too. Like, it's fanatical about all the things that, So either Jesus is God, or he's a lying demon leading people astray, or he's a freaking megalomaniac. It's me, it's me, it's me. Look, I've always been in existence. I forgive sins. I created crap. I sent the prophets. I mean, that's the stuff Jesus says. And so you're like, wow, he's not a good moral teacher. He's either a lying demon, a crazy person, a megalomaniac, or he's the Son of God in the flesh. And so maybe the most offensive one for modern people. Jesus said, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Not Buddha, not Muhammad, not Confucius, not Joseph Smith, not whatever you decide to be your convenient personal truth. Jesus said, it's only through me that people can get to heaven. Whew, you better be God in the flesh then. You better be, because you certainly aren't a good moral teacher. That's a lying demon doctrine if you are not God in the flesh and you're not the only way. Right now, more than ever in history, there are more so-called Christian books that you can find on Amazon that you'll be like, oh, it's under the Christian section, that are basically just trying to make Jesus inoffensive. You know, like only affirming. Anything you want to do, you do it. Go for it, rock it, knock it out. And don't allow yourself to believe in a domesticated Messiah. Don't allow yourself to believe in a tame Aslan of Narnia. He's a lion. He's like, I'm offensive. I understand I'm offensive. And really, like the idea is if you don't see the offensiveness of Jesus, you're not really dealing with the real Jesus. Like you're dealing with a figment of your imagination, a sentimental religious icon. That's what it is, not the real Jesus. So some scholars take this statement here to be the closure of this response to John. John, you're offended by some of the stuff you're hearing and saying from me, that your disciples are telling you. I get that. You're offended. It's good that you've gotten rid of that vague, sentimental view of me that you used to have. You're suddenly offended by me. You're hearing what I'm saying. Now, you got to get past that offense. How do you get past that offense? You got to see first that Jesus is an offensive Messiah, and don't be offended. How? Jesus says, if you want to have a relationship with me, I am Lord of the universe. I'm the boss. I'm the Lord of life. I'm the creator, and there's nothing in the middle with me. Like, this is unlimited commitment. This is pretty fanatical, but luckily you're following a leader of love and of truth and of grace. Frank Herbert, it was like, I'm sorry, you can't just pick the good. Jesus is like, I know I'm offensive. Let me end with this. Paul's mother, Jessica, early in the film starts telling Paul he has to do what she did. Remember, she drank the water of life, which is actually a poison that will kill you if you're a man or an untrained woman. She tells him very early, you have one thing left to do. You must drink the water of life. You must do what I did, and your mind will be open. That's your last step to becoming Messiah, basically. Like, whoa, that's crazy. He's got to drink the poison. Well, funny enough, the night before Jesus was crucified, he prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, knowing what he was about to do. He said, my Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but your will. Meaning, I won't do what I want. I'll do your will if I need to drink this cup. Well, for hundreds of years before Jesus in this moment, there had been a symbol, an image in the Old Testament Hebrew scriptures that constantly, it would be things like, and I'm just kind of making this up, if a nation did something unjust to Israel, God might say through a prophet, ooh, for what you just did, that injustice that you did, the stuff that you're doing right now to Israel, you will drink the cup. What does that mean? You will drink the cup of God's punishment and wrath, his suffering. And so the cup has always been an image of God's wrath. You will drink the cup. So Jesus knows what he's about to do. He's about to go to the cross and suffer on behalf of sinners, and he's going to experience God's wrath for their sin. And he's saying, Father, do I have to drink the cup of your wrath? Do I have to be separated from you in the cross? Do I have to feel the punishment of all the sins of mankind? Do I have to do that? Do I have to drink the cup and die? Is there another way besides drinking the cup? And I think it's interesting that the will of the Father is that Jesus drink the cup, and the will of the mother is that Paul would drink in the film. I don't think that's much of a coincidence. So in the film, Paul drinks the cup. He drinks the poison. And then Shani comes to him and says, he's dead. Like, why would he drink? Men don't drink this. It kills them. She asks unresponsive Paul, Why would you do that? And in the background, Stilgar, the believer, says, because he is the one. And then Johnny looks to Paul's mother and says, you did this to him. You did this to your own son. Does that sound familiar, John 3:16? She made him drink the cup. You have to drink the cup. It's the last thing to become Messiah. So in Paul's death-like state, he puts another prophecy in motion, and Stilgar steps forward and says, another prophecy. The prophecy is this: he shall come back from the dead with desert spring tears. Well, Chani's name means desert spring in Fremen. And so as she begins to cry over Paul, and her tears eventually touch Paul, Stilgar says, as written. And so as Paul then hears a voice inside of him, Quizach Haderach, which is another one of their words for Messiah, which I think would be a dope rapper name. Quizach Haderach. Man, what's up, Quizach Haderach? It says, climb up, arise. And Paul gets up as written. No matter how great of a story writer you are, no matter how much you want to avoid the common storytelling tropes of George Lucas or all the people he's borrowed from, the gospel just keeps coming back around in our stories. It's the greatest story. It's the one true myth. It's the greatest story that's ever been enacted by God throughout history. Let me read this one passage. Paul, this time the Apostle Paul, not Paul of the house that's a part of the movie. He said this: by this gospel you are saved. He says Christ, otherwise Messiah, died for our sins according to the Scriptures. He was buried. He was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures. Can I retranslate that for you? Otherwise, the true promised Messiah died as written. The Messiah was buried as written. The Messiah was raised as written. And today, you can accept the Messiah and say, I believe you are the one. I believe you're the one that came to be my hero, to save me, to drink the cup for me, and you did it on my behalf. I believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of the living God, my Lord and my Savior, and you can be baptized into Christ. Let's pray.